Greek up room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast with the women and the girls down with the guys. Fit not see black, you right, great fight. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. Right? Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, try rap in me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck the deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange we unite. Match forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Match bright and high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces for this fast. Holding it steady cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer, in the orange we unite. Match forever, our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to episode 20 of Mets Hot Stove with a very special guest. Once again, you guys know who he is, Anthony Rivera from Subway to Shea, filling in for Chris. And we got to thank Anthony here because this was a last-minute change. Chris had something come up, and Anthony was like, yeah, we'll talk about all the moves that are happening with the New York Mets. Why the hell not? So we want to thank Anthony for being here, and welcome to the show, guys. Ant, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Rob. Always a pleasure to be on here with you, to have you on my podcast as well, Subway to Shea, and to be on here with you is always great to, coordinate and come together with other content creators, and to be a part of your fan base here is great as well. You got a huge following, and I enjoy talking with them in the chat and all of that. A lot to talk about for these New York Mets and what's been going on. Ready to do it, my friend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, again, all these crazy moves have been happening, and I know you're very excited to talk about all these moves. And I do wonder, when it comes to this Mets offseason so far, it has been lukewarm, so to speak, right? I mean, the high of highs when we got Juan Soto, we stole him away from the Yankees, putting them in this lineup, the lineup that's all in our heads, get Alonso, and that's it, our lineup set. And yet, the Bregman starts to get pushed in our face more and more by, the way of the offseason going by. And Bregman just continues to be a topic. The Tigers just signed Gleyber Torres. It seems like they're going to be out on the Bregman, who was one of the teams that we thought could go after Bregman. Are they going to have more money to throw with Bregman? We don't know. But it just keeps on happening. Bregman Mets. Heyman went on the other day, I think it was yesterday, saying, be careful about the Mets when it comes to Bregman. That's still a possibility. And we're wondering what the hell is going on here with this guy Bregman, with Alonso. And I did a video the other day. I posted it on Christmas, and this was not on a whim or anything like that. And I'm going to, since the news came out a little bit more, I had a source. I never have sources, but I had one person that works in the Mets organization that is a minor league affiliate, a minor league reporter. And, I became friends with him a couple of years ago, and he just texted me and says, hey, I had a Christmas party, couple executives, couple administrative staff were there, and there was rumblings about an offer to Alonso. And he didn't want any credit or anything like that. He didn't want me to give his name or anything like that. So I did not. So I took the brunt of people telling me I was there for clickbait. But, the 3 years, 90 million seems like it's out. Am I going to stay quote unquote official? No, that's not fair. And I want to give him credit, but I can't because you don't want it. The 3 years, 90 seems like exactly what David Stearns loves to do, right? When you heard 3 years, 90, everybody's like, oh yeah, high AAV, short-term deal. The Mets don't want to give him a long-term deal. Nobody in baseball seems like they want to give Pete Alonso a long-term deal. The Mets are bidding against nobody at this point, even though we heard teams are quote-unquote interested in Pete Alonso. I guess there'll be a lot of teams interested on a 3-year deal, but are they willing to go to that $30 million AAV? I don't know. We know the Giants want every star, but don't usually get stars. Nobody wants to go to the Bay Area right now. And, in this crazy, world we're living in, I guess nobody likes California anymore, apparently. I don't know. I don't live there, so I don't know. So what is it with Pete Alonso that teams are just shying away from Pete Alonso? Everybody loves home runs with the new analytics. He's a first baseman. It's not like he bats 197. He hits 90 plus RBIs every year. It's just a weird scenario with Pete Alonso. He's not 35 years old. He's at 30 years old. What do you think it is with Pete Alonso that we've been hearing from years from other teams, from the grapevine, that teams don't see Pete Alonso like Met fans see Pete Alonso? What are your thoughts on that, Ant?
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to shout out in the chat, Dominico Capello. He says, you got a sauce? And I know you have sources. I'm the one that has sauce. I have a lot of sauce left over from Christmas, Christmas Day dinner. But to go back to what you said about Pete, I've been trying to answer this question for the past month. What is it that Pete Alonso is lacking from that other teams are not seeing? I think that he really overplayed his hand here, right? Because last season, or not last season, it was reported last season, but it was in 2023, I think midway, that he was offered, and this is according to Joel Sherman, was offered, what was it, the 7-year, either
150 something?
$158 million, which he turned down. So now he needed to have an amazing season to that contract back, or at least a lot better than that. And so when you have the season that Pete had, which was not an awful season, but it wasn't a great one, right? It wasn't to his standard of a type of season that Pete Alonso needed to have. When you didn't have that, he did do well in the playoffs, which kind of boosted, but he really struggled with runners in scoring position, and he really struggled, with the bases loaded. And when you're trying to create runs and you want a run producer in big spots, and Pete can't be that guy, that's something that people take into account. Still, he had the opportunity to make money, but the problem is he waited. And when you wait and you don't set the standard for first baseman when it comes to contracts, then you're at the mercy of everyone else. And when Christian Walker set the line, because Christian Walker is a really good first baseman, great defensively, puts up the same type of power numbers and almost the same type of RBIs as Pete Alonso, he's just a couple years older. When you do that, which was, what was it, a 3-year deal that he got? 3 years, 70 or 68 million. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but you know what? I do have notes here that I might be able to pull up and find out what the actual amount was here. It was actually, I don't have it. It was 3 years, and it was
around 70 something, 68,
70, around there. But when you set the standard there, now that trickles down to every other first baseman, including Pete Alonso. He was going to get less than what he got, definitely AAV wise, because I had him, if he was going to return to the Mets, the most that I was giving him was 30 mil AAV before everyone else got moved, right? All the other first basemen. Now that they're all gone, for me, the most I would give him is $27.5 million. The best thing that's come out of all of this is that it works into the Mets' favor, right? So much has gone down, and now with this 3 years, 90 mil, if he doesn't take that, I mean, now he's hurting himself even more because everything is in the Mets' court, right? Because you look at Stearns and Cohen already secured Soto. They're still going to need another bat. I always thought they needed 2 bats.
Yeah.
But now they can pivot if they wanted to and bring in Alex Bregman, if that's the case. And there are other first basemen that are still out there. Not the best, but you're telling me you wouldn't take a 1-year deal on a Justin Turner if it meant next year going after Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? There was somebody else that was mentioned in the chat, if I can find it in the chat. I think it was who had mentioned it in the chat. They said Santander for DH, which I don't think is going to happen, but they mentioned the first baseman as well. And I can't seem to find it going back in the chat here. I don't know if you have it at all, but
I'm starting to look. I
here it
didn't.
is. Sanders Cancel said sign Josh Bell to play first base and Anthony Santander to DH. Now, Anthony Santander is in the same kind of trouble right now that Pete Alonso. We've heard nothing about Santander. We barely are hearing anything about Teoscar Hernandez in the outfield as well. But if you're to sign a guy on a one-year deal like a Josh Bell to play first base, or even a Justin Turner, I know he's old, or if you just want to move Mark Vientos, whatever, to first base at this point, it is what it is. But the Mets have everything in their court, right? Like everything is coming up roses for them. And it's not for Pete Alonso. Pete can get a lot more money if he wants to go to Oakland, if he wants to go to, or wherever they're playing now, Sacramento. If he wants to go to San Francisco, he can play out there. But I guarantee you, if he goes to San Francisco, those power numbers are going to diminish.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like that is not a hitter's ballpark. That's why JD Martinez did not go there. He was smart. He said, I don't want to play in San Francisco. They offered me a better deal, but I don't want to play there because that ballpark is going to hurt my, offensive production. So Pete Alonso's got to be very careful with what his next decision is here.
Correct. And the thing with San Francisco too, when it comes to Alonso or any other guy like that is looking to go out there, if you're not going to get a 6-7 year deal from that team, you're not going to go there, especially if there's opt-outs involved because your numbers are going to get hurt, like you said, and that's the issue. Right. And that's why everyone's like, oh, why don't you just go 4 years and, $120 million for Pete Alonso? Because the Mets don't have to. That's why the Mets, you said it, the ball's in their court. The reason why it's in their court because nobody else is bidding here. Nobody else is fighting for Pete Alonso. And I don't even think a team would go 3 for 30 per year, 3 for 90. I don't even think they're going to go that. Look, David Stearns and the Mets has played this perfectly. And if you can get Juan Soto on a 47-year deal and Alex Bregman for a 6-year deal, and that might seem like an overpay for Alex Bregman, but if you get Pete Alonso on the cheap and with opt-outs, as the offer has been stated that there's an opt-out after every year, which opens up, the possibility of, like you said, Vlad Guerrero, and that is probably where a lot of teams are at, right? There's a reason why teams like the Yankees went 1 year with Goldschmidt and didn't go after Christian Walker to lock him up for 3 years. A lot of these teams are setting themselves for the bidding of Vlad Guerrero for next year.
That's what the Mets did last year. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's what the Mets did last year when everyone was like, oh, why are they not signing this person? Why are they not getting? Well, they were trying to set themselves up to bring in Juan Soto, and that's how that worked out for them. So I see a lot of teams doing this. It wouldn't be the worst case scenario for the Mets to do this and then go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if they so wanted. I don't know if he makes it to free agency. You're taking a chance if you're doing that. But, when Pete Alonso is being offered, if it is true, the 390, he's going to be offered $30 million a year. He'll be the highest AAV first baseman, right? Because Christian Walker's not getting that much money. You got to take that.
Yeah. And it's funny because, people like, oh, it's a deal. The $30 million, I think the Mets are doing that and saying, hey, you've been a Met. You've been a great Met. Fans love you. I think that's a fair offer. I think the Mets, and the same thing with the 7 for 158 that they supposedly offered, what was it, in 2023. That's a fair deal because you're buying out an arbitration year. So you're going to save a little bit more money on the contract and you're not going to offer them, an arm and a leg. That was, what was it, $22.5 million. I did the math per year. That at the moment, it was $2.5 million more than a qualifying offer that was given out that year. So you're getting a raise and you're set for the next 7 years of $22 million. And the 30 for 90, 30 for the next 30 for each of the next 3 seasons sounds nice if you don't want to opt out. But if he has a great season, guess what he's going to do? He's going to opt out. So all the Met fans that thinks, oh, he loves to be a Met. No, he's going to opt out as soon as possible. If that happens, if he hits 45 home runs, 140 RBIs, and bats 260, guess what? It helps the Mets, and it also helps Pete Alonso, especially for 2025. So I think people have to realize that just because you're homegrown, just because every Met fans, love you and want you back, right? We all want Pete Alonso back. But if you can do it on a cheaper end, just the way it seems like it's going to happen, so be it. Right? If you have to overpay for Juan Soto, overpay for Alex Bregman, and it might not be the best, like, oh, you couldn't give your homegrown guy the most money or in the most years. You could have gave him a little bit more since he's been here. Business doesn't work like that. The way you get guys in here that are not your homegrown guys, you have to overpay. That's just how it goes, right? You think Max Fried wanted to go to the Yankees just because, the pinstripes are pretty? No, he went there because they gave him 8 years over the 7 that the Red Sox gave him, just like everybody else, right? Everybody's going for the highest bid here. And that's the thing that I always get annoyed about, Ant, when it comes to fans, not just Met fans, it's fans in general, that if the Yankees would have got Juan Soto for similar price, Yankee fans would have been like, "Oh, we're the big brothers again. We did it again. We beat you again." Yeah. But because he goes to the Mets, he forgets how to play right field. He isn't as good. He was in front of Judge, blah blah blah, and all that. Like he didn't have a good season every part of his career that he played everywhere else. Because the Yankees have blinders on when it's not playing for the Yankees. They don't realize that we watched him in the NL East for 4 seasons before he got traded to the NL West and the Padres. So Pete Alonso needs to take this deal. This is not me, being a biased Met fan, and you just said it, being a biased Met fan. It's just a fact. If the Mets are offering him $390, what does that tell you? That tells you that teams are probably willing to go 3 years, but probably less AAV. Unless somebody is so desperate, because you heard Toronto involved, you heard the Giants involved, you heard the Angels, Seattle, Cubs. Right? We know about the Cubs. We know about Seattle. Seattle can't do anything until they actually shed some payroll so they can add that money back to payroll. They're not adding payroll before they shed payroll. The Cubs, I'm not sure. They could be the team that I always thought was going to be a threat, but are they willing to give 7 years? Doesn't seem like anybody wants to do it. And Toronto would actually give them, a bank in Canada if they could, but nobody wants to go to Toronto either. So the Mets are playing this, I think, perfectly, right? I know some people would be like, oh, how can you do this to the homegrown guy? And I understand that. But to keep your homegrown guys, sometimes the player might have to take a little bit less. And, we've seen Aaron Judge do it. And I'm not saying that players should do that or not, right? Get all the money you can. It is a business. But at some point, Pete Alonso has to realize his best opportunity for the most money per year is with the Mets. And probably the best situation for him is coming back to the Mets, where now you have Juan Soto. Now you have you got Lindor with Juan Soto. You got Nimmo. You got Vientos after a great year. There's a lot of guys there that why wouldn't you want to join this party? And all we heard, he wanted to be a Met, and that's all we heard every time they talked to him. Oh, I love it here. I love it here. I love it here. But you turned down 7 for $158, which was a very fair deal in my opinion. And that was after a down year, by the way. And then on top of that, that's all we heard throughout the whole season, where the Mets probably tried to negotiate again. But when you hire Scott Boras, he locks the door on that. So what are you going to do if you're the New York Mets? You're going to pivot. That's why Alex Bregman has been a big topic of discussion for the New York Mets.
Yeah, this thing that is going on with the Mets is called leverage, right? Leverage is happening right here for the Mets. And I got a lot of great comments here from the chat. Brad saying, screw the homegrown talk. We want a championship. Ooh. I was all about homegrown Mets until 1, Jose Reyes broke my heart and left. And then 2, Jacob deGrom was gone. Once Jacob deGrom was gone, I felt like the homegrown stuff was truly out the window when it comes to the New York Mets. And I understood they had to let him go. And look, he hasn't been able to stay healthy and stuff like that. But yeah, to me, it's about the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. I want to see a championship. I was born probably about 2 weeks after the Mets won their last world championship, and I've seen nothing. I want to see a world championship here. I don't care who's got to be in the roster to do it. At least we're going to have Soto. You'll have Lindor. You'll have Nimmo a part of it for now. That's going to probably be the core group of players. If Mark Vientos, if he can avoid the sophomore slump, he can be a part of that as well. And got a couple of homegrown guys coming up to be a part of this team. I look at it's crazy because Cindy McGrath posted on Locked On Mets today. Ryan was saying Heyman reported 7 teams being in on Pete. I don't buy that from Heyman. We all know that Heyman and Scott Boras have this type of relationship. So maybe Scott Boras is, trying to get out there so that the Mets will offer more money, right?
Sure.
That's how this negotiations work with Scott Boras. And, I'm sure that Scott Boras knows really what type of player Pete Alonso is. Is he closer to that Chris Davis type where all power, and then once he gets older, he's going to flail out, that Ryan Howard type first baseman? Because he's not going to be Freddie Freeman. That's for sure. So, and when it comes to first basemen, like, you're not really spending an exorbitant amount of money when it comes to those type of players. So he's going to try to get as much money out of the Mets as possible. And we'll see if Stearns and Cohen budge. But we do know from Stearns and Cohen that when they see the player that they want, they are going to go get it.
Correct.
Goes with Juan Soto. Same could be said about Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They didn't get him, but they really wanted him because he was super young. He had all the talent in the world. Yamamoto just wanted to go to the LA. He wanted to stay close to the Dodgers and be a part of that whole culture. So he stayed there. But I guarantee you, if the Dodgers weren't in on him, the Mets probably would have got him. So the Mets are willing to offer the right contract for the right player that they feel. I love Pete Alonso. I want him back. I think it's better if you have him and Soto in the lineup together. Or you could throw Bregman in the lineup. But, the Mets have to at least come away with two batters this offseason. Two hitters, whether it is Alonso or Bregman. I don't know if they make a trade. I know that there was a comment from Dominico over here that I liked because he wants to trade for Castillo, who I want to trade for. It says sign Pete, Bregman, or Teoscar Hernandez. Sign Tanner Scott, who I want for the bullpen, and Yates as well. But, Pete has overplayed his hand, unfortunately. I love the dude, but this is not working out to his advantage. This is, and I'm not saying stat-wise because he had a better season than Michael Conforto, but this is Michael Conforto Part 2. Conforto got that big extension. He didn't take it. He had one of the worst seasons, walk-off seasons I can ever remember a player having. And, he screwed himself. And now he's doing all these one-year deals. He was hurt. Pete Alonso at least has the opportunity if he does $390. And you know what? Just give him an opt-out after year 1 or year 2. Let him go back into free agency if he wants. That helps out both. It helps out the Mets, and it helps out Pete Alonso to try again.
Yeah, and it seems like if you're not at the top of the ticket when it comes to, the Juan Sotos, the Max Frieds, the Corbin Burns, anybody at that top level free agents, Juan Soto, all those guys, it seemed like more and more now people are not going to be willing to give that tier B free agent long-term deals. It just seems like that's what the teams are going. Like, did anybody thought that Gleyber Torres was going to take a 1-year deal? Everybody thought he was going to get like a 4-year deal, maybe even 5-year deal because of his age. And because, if you look at his numbers actually are pretty decent. And, that is warranted for a 4-year deal with the age and the production. And I don't think he's a very good second baseman. And I think he's an idiot sometimes mentally on the field. But it's amazing to me because he declined a qualifying offer. And he got $6 million less than a qualifying offer. So he lost $6 million where he could have took it, been back with the Yankees, have a great year, and then go back on the free agent market. And he just lost $6 million. Now, again, people can talk about, the taxes are not the same in Michigan than in New York and blah, blah, blah. It comes out to the same thing. Sure, I understand that. But he is also going to Detroit, Michigan. I mean, let's be honest, guys. It's Detroit, Michigan. I mean, yeah, all the taxes are beautiful and wonderful, and it's not New York taxes. Understandable. But all the extra that you get being in New York, the advertisements, the promotions, all that stuff that players always like to talk about from New York, they get more money from that. And you do wonder sometimes, do a lot of these players overplay their hand? Because you can say that Gleyber Torres was one of the better players in the postseason as well. And, I know he had a rough season this year, for the most part, he was one of their better hitters other than Juan Soto for the, and Giancarlo Stanton in the playoffs. The playoffs don't matter no more to a lot of people. Like long term, like if Pete Alonso's home run in Milwaukee basically warranted a long-term deal, why would more teams go after it? Right? It's just, that's how it's been going lately with a lot of these tier B free agents. And I do wonder, I'm not saying it's collaboration between the organizations and the teams, but it just seems like the analytics say it's not worth it anymore unless the player is Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Vlad Guerrero, Manny Machado, guys like that are on the the top 10 list of great players in baseball. That's just the way it's seen like it's going with baseball now. And not that I agree or disagree with it, because I think a team, if you want him, you go get him and screw it. They're also looking at the bottom line, right? That is Stearns' job, is to look at the bottom line, even though Steve Cohen's bottom line is way down the road and down the line. You still got to be smart about it, because the last thing you need to do is have a long-term deal that, and Juan Soto might turn out to be this, in year 11, we're going to be like, God, could we get rid of this guy already? That might be the case, but you're not looking for the next 11 years. You're looking for the next 3 to 5 years, if you really think about it, because this is where your major core that you paid for in the Nimmos, the Lindors, guys like that, along with Juan Soto now, before these guys are out of their prime, and that's when you got to win, because there's no guarantee that Vientos and Alvarez are going to take that mantle and be those core guys. And now you can put Gilbert in there, Clifford in there, Sproat, and whoever else you want to bring in there. And they might be where Nimmo and Lindor is, and Soto and guys like that. Because if they're not like that, we're going to be going through some hard times again, or at least trying to find these guys in free agency, which the Mets are trying to avoid in most positions around the field.
Oh yeah, and the whole point of signing Soto is to win now.
It is.
It has to be. I mean, you have Lindor's going to be another year older. Nimmo, you saw Nimmo, break down towards the end of the season. Lindor had the back issue. Yep. They need another boost in the lineup, and that means having Juan Soto. And what I like about, the deal is I know a lot of Met fans get frustrated with these long-term deals, but this isn't us getting Juan Soto, which we probably would have done under the Wilpons at 35 and giving him a 5 to 6 year contract or an 8-year deal. No, he's 26 years old. By the time the opt-out comes, he will be 30, 31. Mm-hmm. He'll be 30, 31 years old. And if he opts out, that means he had the 5 best years of his career, because now he's looking for even more money. So These are the 5 years that you want to aim to win a World Series. Yeah, and then you can still build with him 31, 32. At least you're thinking at least 8 of these years are going to be solid with Juan Soto. And who knows, maybe he becomes a DH at some point. Maybe he's hitting that way, or maybe they move him to first like they did with Bryce Harper in Philadelphia. And he signed a big deal himself. So, I don't get too crazy with, fans not liking this deal, especially Yankee fans, because considering that they were going to give him almost the exact same deal with $5 million less, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show. So, all of a sudden now he's the worst player in all of baseball. Right. Okay. But yeah, look, that they're building to win now, and they're in win mode now, and they have to win. I can't count on the Cliffords and the Gilberts Correct. Of the world. The only one that I'm looking to be ready next is maybe Ronald Acuna, and maybe if Ronnie Mauricio gets healthy, maybe he gets added to the lineup at some point. But I just can't count on the kids. Like, if you told me to, I'm not a prospect hugger at all. We talked about this in your last episode. Yep. If you're telling me I can trade a couple of these guys to get a starting pitcher, an ace in the staff, I'm probably going to do it, to be honest with you. So, the Mets, until the Mets can, and this is the only part where I'll keep my prospects, is the starting pitching. We see how expensive starting pitching is right now. And that's why I'm holding on to the Sproats and the Tidwells and the Tongs of the world. and helping to continue to build pitching. But when it comes to the everyday players, I mean, they're a dime a dozen. The best person to come out of the prospect pool right now over the last couple of years has honestly been Mark Vientos. He's had the most impact. I'm not saying Francisco Alvarez hasn't, but considering that he was the number one prospect in all of baseball, he did not have the impact that Mark Vientos did last season as a season overall. And then in the postseason, Mark Vientos has been the best out of the three babies or the Mets kids or whatever you want to call them. So they're a dime a dozen.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think people get away from. Nobody's saying to trade 9 of your top 10 prospects and get the guys you want here. You know, get Luis Castillo in here, get Vlad Guerrero in here, whatever. We're not saying to do that. But it's obviously a logjam in the middle infield without top prospects, right? I think Stearns, and this is the way a lot of teams are looking at it nowadays, they want to keep their pitching prospects because they don't want to give long-term deals to pitching prospects. Not only is the money outrageous, the years are scary for a lot of teams because are you really going to get 8 years of Max Fried at top level? No, you're not. There's a pretty good chance you're not. And you're hoping you're getting the best 4 years out of Max Fried before he breaks down. That's what you're hoping for, just like any other pitcher. Corbin Burns, who might get 7 or 8 years. You know, situations like that. I think teams are willing to give longer term deals to position players because they're more likely to stay healthy through the course of that contract. But teams are not going to, like Juan Soto, maybe Anthony Santander, if teams are going to start fighting for him. When teams have to go to the 6th, 7th, 8th year for position players, they will. They don't want to, but they will. They'll be willing to do that for a position player. That's why it was weird with the Max Fried thing that there was a competition for him with the Red Sox and the Yankees, and it started to increase the price, increase the years. You have to have competition for a player. If there's no competition for another player, that team's in the driver's seat. And that is the issue. I think that Pete Alonso, Santander, even Burns, for that matter, even though Burns is at the top of the ticket here. But, you know, again, let's go back to the Tier B guys. I think that's the major issue, is that if teams don't feel like they have to fight with another team to get your services, they're not going to. And again, why bid against yourself? The same thing with Pete Alonso and probably Alex Bregman at this point. I don't think Alex Bregman has a ton of suitors anymore as we get to this other topic and leave Alonso in the back burner here. You know, does the Bregman situation with the Mets have a lot to do with Alonso? I don't think so anymore. I think the Mets see that they might have Alonso exactly where they want him. And unless a team like the Giants or somebody else throws a 6-year deal out there, I think the Mets are willing to give a 6-year deal to Pete Alonso. I think they were probably planning, all right, we might have to go 6 years with Pete Alonso just to keep him away from somebody else and might have to overpay in years to get him. But the way things have turned out, now that they probably don't have to, and now they can splurge a little bit on a Bregman, I don't think one has to do with the other anymore. I think they see the bargain of what they're probably going to get with Pete Alonso and bring in Bregman here. He's only going to make your lineup better. He's going to make your infield defense a lot better. Why not do it? And I think the fact that the Mets could sign Bregman before Pete Alonso signs puts a hell of a lot of pressure on Pete Alonso. But the Bregman situation, there's a lot of smoke here. And the last time we were on the show together, we spoke about this. And it was kind of Alex Bregman and Alonso. You know, it's a pipe dream, but I don't think it is anymore. I think it's very unrelatable at this point. And I think the Mets are going to be like, listen, Bregman's going to make us better. If Alonso comes on board for the price we want, great. The line's going to be outstanding. What is your take with the Bregman situation with all this smoke that's been going around with the Mets and him?
Yeah, and a lot of people in the chat talking about Bregman and Pete together. I think it was Michael Mayer who posted that if the Mets were to sign Bregman, someone had asked if that means they're out on Alonso, and he says no. Yeah. So I could see something happening in those terms. I think it would be the best thing possible for an immediate competition to the Los Angeles Dodgers lineup, right? Because the Dodgers lineup and their pitching staff is probably top number one right now when all are healthy on paper at the very least. And the Mets were within 2 games of heading to the World Series and beating them. And without bringing in a Bregman or Alonso, even them just signing Soto was not enough. Them just signing Sean Manaea, that was not enough. They're going to have to make a big move here when it comes to the offense and bring in whether Bregman, Alonso, or both. I mean, I wouldn't mind having both of them here if the deals are right. We're seeing what the offers have been for Alonso. I don't know what they intend to offer Bregman. There's no numbers have really come out on that, but if they can get something in 5 or 6 year deal with a couple of opt-outs here, I think that's probably the way to go.
Yeah, and the people are talking in the chat that Bregman's gonna block guys. Who? They're not blocking anybody. Really not. Vientos, with his emergence last year, blocked a lot of people. Right? It kind of made a mess of the Mets prospects at this point because, having that many middle infielders, some can play third. If Vientos wouldn't have took off like he did, we would have been talking about a Mauricio or a Jet Williams at third base or Acuna at third or whoever at third base, and maybe McNeil and whoever else is still left at second base. We would have been talking about that. But because of the emergence of Vientos, even if he does go to DH, if Bregman and Alonso is here, you're still blocked, regardless of Vientos, who's here. I think he has 5 more years officially because he only has 1 year of service, if I'm not mistaken. So even if you sign Bregman for say 5 years, it's the same amount of time that Vientos is going to be a part of this team until he's a free agent. So you're not really blocking him because you signed Bregman. There's already a block, and second baseman is only I would say the only open spot, kind of, even though Jeff McNeil is still here.
Yeah.
I believe that the Mets might try to trade Jeff McNeil or have a competition in spring training. But I don't care about blocking people anymore. And I'm 100% on board with Ant when it comes to this. I am not a prospect hugger. I'm not saying to trade all your prospects away, but at some point, you got to start focusing on winning when the opportunity is the best. And right now, the opportunity at least for the next 3 to 4 years, is your best opportunity to win. And if Sproat comes up this year or next year to help us with Tong and Tidwell, great. We all love that. But I feel like Met fans fall into this category, this annoying category where they love the player more over the team. And it seems like the Alonso situation kind of was forming into that until fans finally realized that Alonso, with his bad season and nationally, started to get notoriety with his stats in runners in scoring position and his bloated stats and his stat pad and stats, is where all of a sudden it's not as, oh my God, we can't let Pete Alonso go. Now it's like, maybe it's not the worst thing. No Mets fan is going to tell you they don't want Pete Alonso. I am not the biggest Pete Alonso fan, but I'm no dummy. I mean, sometimes, most of the time, but I'm not. I understand what Pete Alonso is more important to the Mets than he is anybody else. And that is where I think the situation where the Met fan needs to understand. Some point you have to start rooting for the jersey, the letters in the front, like you said, Ant. You have to. Yeah. Because if nobody says you can't fall in love, buy their jersey, whatever you want to do. If you don't win, all we're going to be celebrating is what we're celebrating with David Wright. Because he was a lifelong Met because of him signing that extension with the Mets, right? David Wright technically didn't accomplish anything with the team. You know what he's remembered for? 06, which was great, but we didn't win. And the 2 collapses in 07 and 08. David Wright's a part of that. We love him, but he didn't give us over the hump. Why is Keith Hernandez? Why is Doc? Why is Darryl? Ron Darling? Lenny Dykstra? Why are they so loved till this day? Still to this day, because they won. Not because they were probably better than those players. Maybe they were, maybe they won't. Right? They didn't have long careers that were, Hall of Fame career, Hernandez, sure, guys like that. But it still matters to win because you're going to be remembered and loved forever. People love David Wright because it wasn't team accomplishments. It was because he was a great Met. He was a guy that, spoke up for his teammates. He was the leader, right? He was something that every Met fan can get on board with. And if we would have won, great. But I don't want another David Wright who shows all his stats, his Met stats, and he's top the leaderboard, and that's what we're celebrating. I don't want to celebrate individual awards. Let the players deal with that. Right? You could celebrate that, have all the awards you want. Met fans shouldn't be celebrating stuff like that anymore, right? We haven't won since 86. We got to stop acting like we won in 2006. Because if we won in 2000, I mean, it's still almost 20 years ago, but I think we would have probably been like, hey, I was like in high school at that time. Shoot, I would have loved it. But guess what? It just didn't happen. And we got to start winning here. And when you said it best, I'm just going to reiterate it. We have to start winning. And if it means getting Alonso for a deal that nobody thought that we can get him for 3 years for 90, which is fair, but it's not the 6 years for 180. I'm on board. If Bregman needs to be involved, perfect.
Well, and let it play out too. That's what happened with Sean Manaea. Wasn't Sean Manaea supposed to get 5 years over 100 mil? Didn't happen. The Mets got the right deal with Sean Manaea. So let's let it play out with Pete. When it comes to the prospects, I just want to reiterate because we got some great comments here. Scott, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly, Scott, but Scott Steeves says that Stearns is an advocate for the kids. This is true, but here's the problem. These aren't his kids.
Exactly.
Those were brought upon him. And I would assume, look, they were ready to trade for Garrett Crochet. There were a couple of prospects like Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat who kind of nixed that deal. But these aren't his kids, right? So when you talk about bringing in a guy like Bregman to play third base, and like you said, it's not going to be Bregman who blocked these kids. It really was Mark Vientos and a little bit of Jeff McNeil. Because if you remember, when the season ended in 2023, the talk was Ronnie Mauricio is going to be the third baseman. Yep. Right? That was the talk. Then he got hurt. All right, let's go back to Brett Beatty and see if he could get himself going. Then Mark Vientos starts practicing with Francisco Lindor, and he starts getting himself ready. Obviously, he did not make it, and Beatty did. But Beatty, once again, for this third year in a row, struggled and had to be sent down. And Vientos came and prospered. Then you saw them bring up not Ronald. I keep doing this, but Luisangel Acuna. They brought up Luisangel Acuna once Jeff McNeil got hurt, or was it when Lindor got hurt? I think it was Lindor got hurt. They brought up Luisangel Acuna, but he started playing second base alongside Francisco Lindor when Lindor came back, and he started playing well. So now he's up in the rankings. Yep. And the Mauricio, who needs to still rehab, he's not coming up right off the bat at all. He's going to be rehabbing in AAA. And Brett Beatty, who now has to kind of move around the diamond. He's at second base. He's in the outfield. These are guys that, if you bring Alex Bregman, okay, they may be blocked, but you now, as Cindy McGrath puts it, at some point we need to use some of these prospects as trade chips. Get an ace. Bring an ace into this rotation.
Oh, God.
Whether it is a Luis Castillo or however you viewed a Dylan Cease. Who else is out there to be traded for as a starting pitcher? There's multiple names that I've heard of, but two prominent ones have been Luis Castillo and Dylan Cease. Make a move. Trade some of these prospects.
They're assets at this point, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about this. I'm not saying we're talking about it in a negative light with these prospects, but there is no room for some of these guys. And this is where David Stearns has to do his work, where, again, we know these aren't his guys, but he's smart enough to realize that these guys are going to matter in the organization at some point, either with this team over the next year or two or as assets. And I think David Stearns, when he talked about the evaluation year last year, even though it didn't turn out to be that, he was more talking about, the team, the MLB team for sure, in an evaluation mode with Alonso and other guys. But it was also for the minor league system, right? He has a better feel for what these guys are going to bring. And at some point, you can't leave these guys to die in the minor leagues because their value only is going to shrink. And I'm not saying trade Acuna, right? I don't want to trade Acuna. But I'm sorry, if it's going to get a Luis Castillo or a Dylan Cease here, you got to do it. Maybe more Luis Castillo because he's under control. But you have to think about it. I'm not saying, make a split decision and make that deal, but you have to think about it. And it's not going to hurt you because you can put Ronnie Mauricio there if he's available. If you want to put somebody else at second base or put McNeil there until Jet Williams is ready, you do that. And it's not the end of the world, especially if Alonso and Bregman's on this team. Are you going to really be concerned about Jeff McNeil batting seventh? If we're talking about, and we talked about this last year, until the cows come home, we all talked about it. We were talking about Bader and McNeil being terrible. You know why? Because the top of the order wasn't doing their job, and we were counting on the bottom of the order to pick it up. That's why we were talking about the 7 through 9 hitters. We shouldn't be doing it. If your team is good and your offense is supposed to be carried by your top 5 to 6 guys, why the hell are we talking about the 7 through 9 guys? I'm not saying it's supposed to be irrelevant. They will help a team. But when you're counting on them and, oh my God, Jeff McNeil can't help this lineup. Yeah, he can. If he's batting 7th and not 2nd, he can help this lineup. Just like other guys can. But at the end of the day, you have to remember, the big guys got to do the job. And at the bottom of the order, things can happen. If things work out better for us, wonderful. But we're not counting on those guys to be the best players on this team offensively. We're just not. And I think it's a trickle-down effect when it comes to any of our prospects. Vientos showed up. He proved himself. Perfect. Great. You're on this team. Beatty hasn't. He's a lone wolf right now. We don't know what the hell he's going to be with this team. Too bad. If Jeff McNeil has a good spring training, why worry about Acuna? Right? Maybe that gives us an opportunity to, put McNeil out there at second base, get the best of him for one more year, and then Jet Williams is ready. Maybe you can use Acuna to get Luis Castillo or a Dylan Cease. Maybe that is the possibility, right? I know we've seen what Acuna can do, but if you trade him to Seattle and baseball Siberia, who cares? If Acuna becomes the player we might think he can be, sign him in 6 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not the end of the world. And if the Mets have a world championship to show for it, I'm not going to cry about Luis Acuna or any other prospect that we might have traded, right? If the Mets would have won in 2015, will we be crying about Michael Fulmer, who was our best pitching prospect that everybody, oh my God, I couldn't believe you gave? We were so in shock because we actually got a hitter that people talked about it, but it didn't matter because what we needed was a bat, and we finally got it. People were talking about Michael Fulmer. Oh, I couldn't believe they did that for a rental. But guess what? It kind of worked out. I mean, it kind of was a disaster.
Didn't Fulmer only have like one really good year?
Yeah, and he never became the player that everybody thought he would be. And that's the thing. I'm not saying that Acuna is not going to be what he could be. There could be a guy that could be an all-star. But we're looking at it the wrong way. Are we trying to win? That's the question we have to ask, right? And I know you're on the same page as me with this. We're trying to win. You can't always worry about 2029 and the prospect that could come up and be great. I'm not worried about that. An asteroid can hit Earth and we're all done. Let's worry about the next couple of seasons. Let's worry about next year, right? Juan Soto, even though it's a 15-year deal, it is a win now move, like you said. And I think this Bregman possible move, even the Alonso move, is a win now move, right? Why are we acting like Pete Alonso is a signing, even if it is a 5 or 6 year deal for 2030? No, it's not. It's a win now deal. The Brandon Nimmo long-term deal, the Lindor long-term deal was to win over the period of time when they're still in their prime. And that's what we have to win over the next 3 to 4 years, because those prospects might be irrelevant even if they're still here. Because if we don't win with the prime of this core, we're going to be having conversations about Tidwell, Sproat, Acuna, Williams, Mauricio, Clifford, Gilbert, and hope they can be the guys that we all hope they would be, because all we're going to say, wow, remember when we could have traded Brett Beatty for Luzardo 3 years ago? That would have been great, right? It might have helped our rotation a little bit. But guess what? We didn't do it because we thought Beatty was the next best thing since sliced bread. And that's our problem. And that is the issue that Met fans and the organization don't get a pass for this. Even though we had 40 GMs over the last couple of seasons, the stability matters in this situation, because if David Stern's going to be here long term, you can win now and still be a top 10 farm system in baseball. And the Mets are that right now. And they have an opportunity to win now, plus have a very good farm system. Why do the Dodgers win? Why did the Texas Rangers win a couple of years ago? They finally traded their prospects when needed to go on a run. And they got their world championship. And that's the crazy thing that I think 2022 kind of hurt us. Maybe even 2015. Maybe if we would have got more bullpen help or more pitching with Cespedes, maybe it would have been different. But we got to stop being afraid of trading prospects because of the what if. Until we get past that fear, I think it's going to be a problem. And until Stearns does it, I'm not going to give him credit for doing it until he does it. And I don't know if he's going to do it, because Castillo and Cease should be on this Mets team already, to be quite honest with you. Why he's not doing it, I don't know. Maybe it's a negotiated employee. Maybe the Mariners and the Padres are still trying to get more out of whoever. But it comes to our next topic. Are the Mets done with their rotation? Heyman also brought that up as well in that New York Post article. If the Mets are really done with this rotation, I'm sorry. That scares the living daylights out of me, right? I love Manaea. He's not a number one. He's not. He's a 2 if he pitches like last year, probably a 3. I'm going to put him in the 2 spot just because, the respect that I have for him. Senga, who the hell knows? He was injured and pitched 1 year that was really good in a dead year for the Mets. And then we go with the Montas of the world, the David Petersons of the world. Pick your poison with anybody else that's going to be in this rotation. Do you think the Mets are done? And why did Heyman say that in his article, that the Mets might be done with their rotation? Is this a Boris mouthpiece because of Burns, or because of, I think Luis Castillo is a Boris client. Maybe that kind of was the way Boris tried to help his clients a little bit. What do you think it is? Do you think the Mets are done? And do you think that Heyman part of the article with the rotation being done was a mouthpiece for Boris?
It wouldn't be a great move for Scott Boras to have the Mets be out on Burns, right? Like, that wouldn't be a good idea to say that. But I think right now the Mets are in a holding pattern with the rotation. I think they are waiting for January 15th when Roki Sasaki can sign. Because if Roki Sasaki, the deal that they can have with Roki Sasaki is a minor league deal. I think they are waiting to see what happens there. I've said on Subway to Shea multiple times already, as much as I love Manaea and Sean Manaea and I want him back, like, you still need another starting pitcher on top of that. He could not be the only one that you bring in here, one of their, I guess, top tiers. He's really a 2. He's really a 2 at his best. 3 probably if he stays consistent. You still need more starting pitching. And right now, there are too many question marks when it comes to the starting pitching. Can Manaea replicate what he did last season? Is Kodai Senga going to stay healthy? That's another thing. David Peterson has not been consistent his whole entire career. And as great as last season was, he was probably one of the best starting pitchers on the staff. Is he going to be able to stay consistent? Something that he hasn't been able to do in the past. And we see with guys like Tyler McGill, they can't stay consistent. That's another issue. Griffin Canning, to me, he's really a long man, a swing type guy. You have Frankie Montas, which is I guess, the Stearns pet project and trying to figure out and trying to, he's really Sean Manaea, Luis Severino part 2. And then you have another project that you're working on in Clay Holmes, which you're trying to make him a starter again and hoping he becomes the next Michael King, or, there's the Reyes out there of the world. There's so many pitchers that have now made the transition
Lugo.
back to being starting pitchers. Yep. Seth Lugo is another example, but there's no guarantee that that's going to work. So there's a lot of questions. And one of the things that I did not want the Mets to do coming into this year was to kind of replay that role. Yeah, do it with one pitcher. You could do it with one, but having a gamble on so many starting pitchers is going to be a problem, which means, you know what? You're going to have to start getting some legit people in the bullpen. That's why I want a guy like Tanner Scott in there. He's a lefty that the Mets desperately need. And on days that you have Edwin Diaz coming in the 6th inning, like in the postseason where you can't trust anyone else, at least Tanner Scott can close. So, the Mets are going to have to figure out this pitching. Otherwise, that was the downfall in the postseason, right? Everyone got tired, and I get it, right? Minaya had not pitched the amount of innings that he did. Luis Severino was coming back from the injury. David Peterson had been put into the bullpen to be the swing guy, and he did a great job at it. But most of the bullpen was untrustworthy outside of Edwin Diaz. And even Edwin Diaz had his own falling out in a couple of the games in the postseason. So the Mets have to get to a point where they are not relying on Edwin Diaz to come in and get one out in the 6th inning to then lose him for the rest of the game. These guys have to be relied upon to get outs, and they have to do a better job at it. So whether, you don't even know who's going to stay healthy, right? Because Brooks Raley got hurt. They lost Drew Smith. Daniel Nunez got hurt. So any of these guys can go out at any point of the season. They got to load up on some of these bullpen guys and start building a proper bullpen, just like the Los Angeles Dodgers did. I mean, they beat us with a bullpen game in Game 6. They beat the Yankees with a bullpen game as well. The Mets have to, if they're going to be the Los Angeles Dodgers of the East Coast, there's a prime example of how to do that. And that's, building a strong pitching staff, building a strong bullpen, because a lot of these guys that are in the rotation, are they going to give us 5 innings a night? Because that's what the Mets desperately need, is 5 innings a night. That it's crazy to think that I'm asking, and that we're all asking for them to get 5 innings when, previous years people are going 6, 7. I mean, I think I saw a stat of Bob Gibson, how many games he's pitched into the 9th inning. I know it was the 60s, but man, how far starting pitching has come down. Could you imagine like a guy like Gibson or Dwight Gooden, what they would get on the market right now? They'd be like in the billions at this point. Like these guys that are these starting pitchers now, they don't deserve the money that they're getting.
No,
it's ridiculous.
The market says it.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
it's crazy. Yeah. So I hope that they're not done with the rotation. I think they're still waiting out Roki Sasaki to see what happens. I never thought Corbin Burns was in play, unless it was some type of short-term deal with a huge AAV, a la what Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer got. But I never thought they were in on him. I would not waste a qualifying offer on Nick Pivetta. I would try to make a trade if possible. We talked about the guys, Castillo, Dylan Cease. There's other names out there, but they definitely need to do a little bit more work, not just on the starting rotation, but the whole pitching staff as a whole, because it can't be just Stearns bringing in these pet projects for the pitching lab. It just can't. It can't be like that all the time. I mean, the Yankees have a rotation that's set already, right? I don't like the deal for Max Fried, but the next couple of years, he's probably going to be really good, right? Garrett Cole's got a few more years left in him. They have Rodon, who has a good year, has a bad year, but whatever. He's a starter that's going to pitch 5 or 6 innings. They got their Clark Schmidt. They got their rotation set. The Dodgers have their rotation set. The Braves, if healthy, have a rotation. Who else? So we could throw the Padres in there as well. The Mets have to figure out this pitching staff. It can't just be a bunch of boppers in the lineup. They have to pitch as well.
We got some breaking news. Teoscar Hernandez is off the boards, going to the Dodgers, back to the Dodgers. 3 years, $66 million. And just thinking, this is why we keep on talking about the Mets, East Coast, Dodgers, West Coast, and the Mets want to replicate the Dodgers. They signed Michael Conforto, and now they signed Teoscar Hernandez. People thought the Conforto signing was like, oh, maybe they are pivoting away from Teoscar Hernandez, right? 66, million over 3 years, it's nothing special. It's $22 million a year. And you know what? That's a pretty good deal considering what Teoscar Hernandez did for the Dodgers. But they also signed Michael Conforto. You see what I'm saying? They're basically overlapping each other. Yet they're doing it anyway. And I'm not saying to, sign another sign Anthony Santander and figure out where to put him. But you can do that, right? All I hear Met fans are saying, oh, why don't you put Jet Williams in the center field? Why don't you put Mauricio, at third base? Putting guys out of position is nice, but I'd rather have proven players like Bregman, like Teoscar Hernandez, because him and Conforto are probably going to be DHing and right field and left field all over the place here. You know why? Because the Dodgers don't care about money, and the Dodgers say, let's get the best players we can, and we'll figure out where to put these guys and play them. This is the same situation we're talking about with Alonso and Bregman. Yes, Bregman might move Vientos to DH, but at the end of the day, it makes your team better. Right? So Teoscar Hernandez is off the board. So that's going to pivot to Anthony Santander, who is the top outfielder on the market now. What are teams going to do, right? I think a lot of people thought Teoscar was not going to be back with the Dodgers, considering that it was taking a while. But now he's a Dodger. And I do wonder what we're trying to do here as a New York Mets with the rotation. Because I'm sorry, and I'm so glad you brought it up once again. You're on point today. You really, usually are, but you're on point on the same level where I am right now. The rotation is why we lost in the playoffs, right? The Mets, why do we have basically no shot, even though we got the game 6 of the NLCS? Why do we get what happened in the NLCS? The Dodgers were just putting up runs like crazy because, and I say this over and over again, for the people who think Manaea is an ace, the Mets didn't believe that last year in the playoffs because they went with Senga 2 times in game 1s in the playoffs. That's how much they believe Manaea wasn't a number 1 because Manaea both times was rested enough to pitch in game 1. The reason why he didn't was because they don't believe that he was an ace and they were trying to sneak one by, which they did with the Phillies, but they didn't get it. They didn't pull a fast one on the Dodgers. Who knows if Manaea would have pitched game 1 as well as he pitched in game 2? Who knows what would have happened? Who knows? But we have to have sure things. And we all love Manaea. I think he could be a number 2. I really do believe that. And I know Ken's talking about, numbers don't matter. Aces don't matter. 1 through 3, 4, 5 don't. They all matter. But why go into the season, and like you said, with too many question marks in a rotation, when if those question marks aren't what you believe they could be or turn out to be, you know what you're going to be looking for at the trade deadline? Starting pitching. Something that you could have easily got in the offseason. And this year was supposed to be the year of the least amount of question marks going into 2025 season. I don't want no question marks. I really don't. I'm not saying get Burns and Manaea and, trade for Luis Castillo. Hey, I take it. But we're just asking for one pitcher that could be 1A with Sean Manaea. If you get that and you bring in Alonso back and you could bring in Bregman, you're talking about a team that could be top 3 in baseball, top 4 in baseball, easily. Like, that's how good this team can be. They're on the precipice of being one of the biggest contenders in baseball. And that is with a really tough National League. And I think why I hope this Heyman article is not true when it comes to the rotation. I don't believe it is. I think Heyman's trying to probably push his agenda with Boris when it comes to his clients a little bit. And maybe, but I think the Mets are waiting for Sasaki. And I think Burns and the Castillo possibility and the Cease possibility might not go down until after Sasaki signs, because that puts a lot of pressure on the teams that don't get Sasaki.
And even if they do sign Sasaki, that doesn't necessarily mean like that's their ace. The growing pains will be there. They'll most definitely have to have a 6-man rotation, to say the least, if they were to land Sasaki, right? Because Kodai Senga is not going to be pitching every 5th day. Sasaki won't be pitching every 5th day. You're going to have to watch the innings with those 2 guys. You're going to have to build Mania back up again. And then now you're playing the game with Griffin Canning and Clay Holmes. Now, I wanted Clay Holmes, but it was to be in the bullpen, to set up for Edwin Diaz, not necessarily the rotation. But everything that I've heard from people talk about, they like his stuff for the rotation. So I'm on a wait and see basis. It still does not make this rotation, that much better. I'm willing to give it an opportunity, but every season we can't go into the year doing this, pet projects and hoping that they all work out, because they're not all going to work out. Adrian Hauser didn't work out in the rotation, and I thought that it would be a given that he would be at least a decent, fifth guy in the rotation. He wasn't even that. He wasn't even good in the bullpen. So the Mets have a lot of work to be done. If they are going to get someone to go up with a Sean Manaea, it's going to have to be signing a Corbin Burns or trading for a Luis Castillo. Now, you can say what you want, excuse me, whether you think Castillo or Cease is the number one, but it does make their rotation better than what it looks like now. So, I would definitely inquire about a trade. It's more about Luis Castillo than Cease, but I know a lot of people like Cease as well. But if you want the ace thing, that's Corbin Burns, and it just doesn't seem like they're willing to give Corbin Burns that much money.
Yeah, unfortunately, it should be Burns. I know Burns is the obvious choice because, again, if you get a Corbin Burns, everything else can fall into a place. You already got a deal with Sean Manaea. I think you got a discount. I think he took less money to come back to the Mets, even though, it seemed like a pretty good deal considering 2 years ago he was not the pitcher he was last year. I think we got a deal with Sean Manaea, and you got a deal with Montas, and you really haven't spent a lot in the rotation. If you get Burns, you at least solidify your top of the rotation with him and Manaea would be outstanding. Like Senga's your number 3, and you can work around with your 4 or 5 or possibly 6 with the Montas and David Petersons. There's a trust factor where every 5th day Burns and Manaea is going to give you A1 stuff, no problem. And then you can worry about the ifs in the back end of the rotation because every 5th day you got 2 guys that are going to come out there and give their best on the mound in Manaea and Burns, and whatever you get out of the other guys is gravy at this point, because when you have 2 guys that you can trust in your rotation, more often than not, you're going to win 2 of those games almost every week. It's not a guarantee, but it's a pretty damn good chance, and percentage-wise, every time. So you don't have to worry about winning the game with Montas on a 3-game losing streak or something like that, and break the losing streak with Montas or David Peterson. That's a lot of ifs, and I don't want ifs anymore.
Yeah, and what the Mets desperately need, if they're not going to bring in an ace of the staff, they need an innings eater. Why did in 2015 those kids work out so well? They were on innings limits. Matt Harvey was on an innings limit, although he went past it. Why did that rotation work out? Because they had Bartolo Colon eating innings when the team desperately he could have gotten blitzed in a game, and he was staying in there and giving them innings. There at least needs to be one starter in this rotation that needs to eat innings for this team, whether it's an old grizzled veteran or a young guy that throws innings. Now you got 2 guys in Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning. Like, are they going to eat innings? I don't know if they're really going to get Frankie Montas. I don't know if he's going to do that. Who threw the most innings last year? Severino did, and Manaea, I think, was an out behind him in innings. I think it was like 182 to 181.2 innings pitched.
Yep.
They need guys. That maybe that's where a guy like I can't believe I'm saying this, because I wanted him off the team, and I think May, but considering the fact that Jose Quintana pitched the way he did in September. If you're not going to get any other starter, why not give a 1-year deal to Quintana and throw him in the back of the rotation?
I agree.
Just to have a body. I mean, you need bodies at this point.
He's a guy that is reliable innings, right? And again, you even said it. You wanted them off the team. I was a big proponent of Quintana the entire year, right? I mean, getting to the trade deadline, Chris was talking about trading Quintana for even a bullpen arm at that point in time. And I always like veterans that can show up and give you innings, and it eats some innings. And I think that's where Montas is. I think where Stern's looking at Montas is, even if he is a 4.5 ERA type guy, he's going to give you innings. And I think that's the thing where he's looking at. But yeah, I signed Jose Quintana. Absolutely, I signed Jose Quintana. You know why? Because yeah, the back end of the rotation, you don't need them to be star power, but you need to give them innings, especially with Shomania. We all love Shomania. We don't know what we're going to get from him arm-wise. Pitching the most amount of innings in his career. We don't know how he's going to bounce back. So for everybody who trusts Shomania, I'm praying that he can give us what similar to what he gave us last year. But we don't know what that arm's how is it gonna bounce back? Pitching deep into the playoffs, pitching the most amount of innings he did. I think 5 years. I think he got as close 5 years ago to the innings he did last year. That is a dangerous game to play, hoping he can bounce back from that. I think he will. I don't think he's going to be as good as he was last year, but I don't, again, he doesn't need to be that if you get a pitcher in here that is a little bit above his caliber, if not much better. And that's why we keep on bringing up Castillo, a possibility of Cease, Burns. And I think Sasaki can be an ace, but again, there's going to be growing pains. We all know that. But here's the issue that I have with Sasaki. And as we get to the last topic here with the bench and all that, Sasaki's going to be on the innings limit. The 6-man rotation is for Senga. If you bring in Sasaki, which I think we'll all be okay with, but we also got to watch his innings as well. This is why I want Castillo, Cease, or Burns over Sasaki, and that might sound crazy to some people, because you're going to have two guys in Senga and Sasaki that you have to watch their innings. Senga with the injury, Sasaki coming over from Japan. That is a lot of innings you have to watch. Where are we getting those innings from? Where are we going to pick up those innings? Could Minaya do it again? We hope so. I think Montas can do it. I think if Peterson stays healthy, I think he can do it. I don't know how well they're going to pitch, but they can give you innings. I think that's the issue that we're falling into. And that's why it's seeming more and more that the Mets are leaning on getting Sasaki and hoping they're getting him. If they do, I mean, yeah, he might pitch lights out Sasaki, but is he going to pitch more than 4 or 5 innings at any moment? He could be pitching a perfect game. He's coming out in the 5th inning. That's going to annoy a lot of people. That's worrisome to me, because all that's going to do is be a big question if you're going to say, oh, Senga hasn't pitched 160 innings since his first year with the Mets. Sasaki's never done these innings before, except in Japan, but he pitched once a week. That's what you're going to start hearing.
Yeah. And I think Goomba 999 has it correct. Sasaki is a bonus, and you need a guy like Castillo or Cease as well to be in the rotation. Sasaki is not going to be an ace right off the bat. Who even knows if he's going to be an ace? The whole point of getting Sasaki is the fact that you don't have to pay him what you're paying Yamamoto or a deal like Kodai Senga got. This guy's going to be on a minor league deal. So you have to be all in on trying to get him. Now it comes down to really preference for him, which I really think he's going to go to San Diego because his buddy Hugh Darvish is out there. So that's where I think he's going. But if you could try to get him, why not? And then Joel C says we needed to bulk the bullpen. I agree. That's something that needs to be done. I mean, there's still guys out there that you can get for this bullpen to help out. So why not try to, bulk up the bullpen? I know he usually does like these signings late into the offseason when it comes to the bullpen, but the Mets really need to figure out this rotation. And obviously, like Scott Steve says that, there's Jose Budo. He'll probably be another swingman bullpen guy. Who knows what Paul Blackburn's going to be able to give us, especially coming back from that back injury. And then you got Tyler McGill, who I kind of am done with Tyler McGill. Figure out if he's going to be a starting pitcher or come out of the bullpen, and let's move on from there, because he is just so inconsistent. Every year, he's too inconsistent. All you hear about is the stuff that he has and what he can do with his stuff, and then he ends up being a 500 pitcher with a 4.5 to 5 ERA. I just can't.
Yeah, and you know what? That's going to be once this Bregman Alonso nonsense, which who knows when that's going to come to a story ending. I think Bregman's going to sign before Alonso, and I still believe Bregman's going to be a Met, and that's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Alonso because the Mets can pivot if they want to. And this leads to a little bit of the back end of the roster. And the big part of why the Mets were so successful last year was their bench. It was the Tyrone Taylors of the world, the addition of Iglesias coming up for the minors, the addition of Winker at the deadline. The bench was a huge part of this Mets success last year and their run in the playoffs. Do you see Winker, Iglesias back on this team? Obviously, bench roles and possible DH. I'm not sure with Winker anymore. I think Iglesias is going to happen just because of the whole chemistry thing. I think they're going to find a way to put him on this roster. Do you think Winker and Iglesias are coming back, or somebody else you might want other than either of these two guys, or two other guys other than them? What are your thoughts on that?
Iglesias should be back. I mean, they need a backup infielder. Can't lose, McNeil and Francisco Lindor and not have a guy that plays up the middle, that plays that great defense up the middle as Jose Iglesias does. You can't go without a veteran presence like him on the bench. Unless he finds a starting role or gets a lot more money somewhere else for, I think you got to bring back Jose Iglesias. I want Jesse Winker back as well, but I don't know. As the days go by, it feels a whole lot less likely that we get to see Jesse Winker back in a Mets uniform. I want them both back, to be honest.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And look, there is like two bench spots available, one in the outfield, possible DH, and a backup infielder.
Right? Oh, yeah, right. You got Terrence, right? Terrence is the backup catcher. You got, Siri and Tyrone Taylor going back and forth. That's two. Yep. Who else is in that right now? That I think that's it right at the moment, right? Out of the bullpen, out of the bench.
I would think you would want two infielders, but you're gonna probably need a backup first base / third baseman, I would think, right? Because they didn't really have that last year. The backup Alonso. Alonso played every day. I think sometimes you have to give these guys a day or two rest every now and then just to give them a mental break, especially Pete Alonso, Lindor with the back possibility, But I think a guy like, I don't know, whoever you want as a backup. But, I mean, maybe they won't have a backup first baseman. Maybe they'll just go with two backup infielders, Iglesias, and maybe leave Acuna up here. Or maybe if McNeil doesn't win the starting job, have him as the bench with Iglesias. Because even whoever is a starting center fielder, I don't mind Winker and Tyrone Taylor on the bench. That's a solid bench. And I do think the Mets are going to leave the DH open to have it as a rotation. Basically, one day Alonso will get the day off at first. He'll DH. Alvarez would DH. Lindor would DH. You can Nimmo would DH. I think you can give a lot of guys days off their feet on the field by DHing them. So I would be shocked if Iglesias is not backed. And, he is a Boris client now. He did hire Boris for the reasons, as we all probably know, he wants money. I don't know. Again, I think the Winker Iglesias thing, I think Iglesias is going to come back to the Mets. I think the Winker situation is going to be fascinating to me. I mean, I know people are not going to worry about bench guys, but you know what? He was the badass on the team. He was the guy that, he would throw punches if he needs to. Like, that guy scares the hell out of me. Like, that's a guy you don't want to be in the alley with. Like, that guy doesn't look crazy, but he is crazy. And that's the type of guy I think that rubs people the wrong way on the other team and gets them off their game. I truly believe that. Like, he pisses people off so much, as he did Met fans a few years back with the Reds, that he takes them off their game a little bit. And I like that edge. I think the Mets needed that, a part of that core. I think that edge came from the bench. I think Tyrone Taylor, the Winker, the bench kind of gives you that edginess to the team. When your stars do the job, you need that edginess coming off the bench. And Iglesias, whatever he did, culture-wise, loosened everybody up. We all know that, right? I don't know if it was the OMG song. I don't know. Who knows? Whatever it was even before the song came out. There was a different way of doing things once Iglesias got there. And he was a huge part of that. And I don't think you can lose that, especially in a year where you got, different names in the rotation. You got Soto coming in here. You want that dynamic to be very similar culture-wise going into 2025. And
Yeah.
Winker and Iglesias will do that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right. Let's give credit where credit's due. When does Grimace get signed? Because that's that's the real thing. Now I'm just kidding.
What about Haktua? Come on now.
Oh my gosh. The list goes on and on of how many mascots and stuff we had throughout the entire season. But I agree with Ken Thal. Winker is needed. To me, he is. To me, he is. I don't know how everyone else feels, but you, me, Ken Thal, we all agree that Winker is, a huge part of the vibes of this team that were kind of lacking, right? There was like this toughness that was lacking from this team, even going all the way back to 2022 when they, got hit at will and did nothing about it. But you had a guy like Jose Iglesias who brought the good vibes. You got a toughness in Winker that was desperately needed for this team. And I know the benches always get overlooked, but back in the day when the Mets were fielding a whole bunch of old farts in the lineup that would get hurt all the time, they had to rely on a bench, and they had to rely on a minor league system that wasn't ready yet. So to have a nice bench would be great. We saw what Torrens did as a backup catcher, although he kind of fell apart with more playing time, but he's going to be backing up Francisco Alvarez. You have the combination of Siri and Taylor, both great defenders. Taylor's a little underrated, I think, in my opinion. I thought he had a pretty good season being that fourth outfielder.
And he was the throw-in that deal with Hauser.
Yeah. I don't know what
Jose player.
Right. Absolutely. It definitely was the best player of that trade. Jose Siri, obviously he can hit the home runs. He doesn't hit for average, but he plays a great outfield. And that's what you're going to need, right? When you have Brandon Nimmo, who's coming back from plantar fasciitis on one side, and then you got Juan Soto, who is not the greatest defender on the other side. Some people, especially Yankee fans, think he's the worst defender of all time. You're going to need a good center fielder, controlling that whole situation.
Agree. And Ian, that was the reason why I think the Mets got Siri in the trade, was because of the potential. Even if they didn't get Juan Soto, and they might have went with Marte in right field, you got control over that right center field gap, regardless of who's playing right field. Now, your right fielder, who is now Soto, only you got to worry about, playing straight up and the line. That's it. A lot of times last year, Juan Soto was going in the right center field gap. If you had a real center fielder, which Aaron Judge is not, how many times Aaron Judge pulled up on balls that he could have called off, and Juan Soto had to go the extra mile, which he doesn't like to, and he's not good enough to do it. You need a great center fielder when you got Nimmo with the plantar fasciitis, who I still think is a better left fielder than a center fielder, but we know he's probably plantar fasciitis don't go away, right? It's going to flare up. You got to protect the gaps with your center fielder. And I think the Bader before Tyrone Taylor took over, those two combination of guys patrol them gaps. And that was huge for Marte and Nimmo that, were coming back from injuries and were struggling at times in the outfield because of the injuries. Same issue here. Siri or Tyrone Taylor, you don't got to worry about those gaps. And I think that's a huge situation that not enough people are talking about. That is a huge – when we traded for Siri, I'm like, Stearns knows something we don't in regards to not just Soto, but common sense.
Well,
he talks about run production. He talks about defense. He talked about it the day he took over the job as president of baseball ops for the Mets. Run prevention is the biggest thing he always talks about. And defense is a huge part of it. That's why they're talking about Bregman. Even though Viento's shown he can play third very well, when you get a Gold Glover and Bregman at third base, he's better than Vientos. Run prevention matters. And if people want to talk about Alonso, how he scoops balls, great. He helps errors that preventing errors. Great. That all as a whole protects the run prevention motto that David Stearns loves. And if you add those bats in there with those names we talked about, it's a dangerous team. because this team can easily score 6.5 runs per ball game if Bregman and Alonso, along with the other guys that are already on the team. That's an easy way of run prevention. If you can give up 3.5 runs per game, even 4 runs per game, you're going to win a lot of games with that lineup. And you've seen when you score that many runs per game, you're in a good spot because your pitchers don't have to be perfect. Last year, the Mets pitching had to be perfect until the lineup started to kick up, right?
And the defense got better because they were awful in the beginning of the season.
Correct.
Awful.
Yeah. I mean, who was out starting third baseman? We all remember Joey Wendell, right?
Yeah. The best player we had defensive-wise was Harrison Bader. Right, Cindy McGrath pulling up that Bader was good. His defense was amazing. Absolutely true. And that's why I think that they went in to get Jose Siri this time around, because they have years of control with Siri. He's a lot cheaper than paying $10 million for a year for Harrison Bader, who's kind of going to give you the same production, maybe a little bit better offensively, but the power more in line with a guy like Jose Siri. So that's probably why they're moving on from a guy like Bader.
Exactly, because Siri can easily give you 20 home runs. And I do like the dynamic of Tyrone Taylor on the bench, even though I know some people probably want Taylor to start. I like Taylor on the bench because Siri's mostly a center fielder. I don't want to put him in the corners when he hasn't really played there much. Leave him in center field. Tyrone Taylor can step in for defensive purposes at any moment in the corners, play all 3 outfield positions. Tyrone Taylor is best suited on the bench because he can play all those 3 outfield positions with no problem. And again, Winker, Iglesias, we all want them back. I think they're 2 proponents that, yes, are on the back end of the roster, but are probably one of the biggest importance of this team. At least Iglesias is. I think Winker is too. I would think Stearns will want both of them back. But again, it comes down to what these guys want. Again, Iglesias hired Boris for a reason. And Winker, I don't think he would take a bench role with the Mets when he could probably get a starting job elsewhere if somebody offers that to him. I mean that's a possibility. But
I think he would be the same exact player he was with the Mets. He'll fill in a couple of days. They'll pull him out of the 5th inning and have him rest. So like his biggest value came to us in the postseason. He was one of the best hitters we had on the team. If they kept him in the lineup, that's the only big problem that I think that Carlos Mendoza had, was taking him out of the lineup and, giving JD Martinez, the so long goodbye. Thanks for playing for us here. Here's a spot for you in the lineup. Weren't they like 8-2 with Winker in the lineup? And they won none of the games that JD Martinez played. That's for sure. So this Mets team next year, right? Well, we're moving on, right, from we're moving on from OMG and those vibes that help us get to the postseason. And now the Mets need to build an actual team roster that can win on a daily, consistent basis. It can't be this luck. We can't always be looking for that 9th inning home run to save us like Lindor and Alonso did. They actually have to put a team together that's going to win and beat the Dodgers, beat the Phillies, who are going to be good next year again, beat the Atlanta Braves, who are coming back from injury, beat the San Diego Padres, because now the Mets have put themselves, after getting that far to within 2 games of the World Series, now they put themselves in that echelon of teams. They're going to have to figure out a way to be good again like that. And be better. Yeah.
Yeah, we're a target now. We're not that fun, lucky look at the surprise Mets. No, we are contenders now. We are a team that when we come to town, we're gonna have a bullseye on our backs. It's just a fact. Can the Mets, and this is, we still haven't seen this core, by the way. If Alonso comes back, haven't seen this core where the expectations were high, i.e. 2022 and 2023. When the expectations are high and the target's on them, do they step up when the pressure starts on day 1 in March, late March, in Houston? They got to get going right away. We can't have slow starts like we did the last couple of seasons. It's not going to benefit us very well at all.
And a big part of that is Soto. Signing Soto is a huge part of that, because look at what Soto did to the Yankees in the 1 year that the Yankees were a 500 team, if we remember. They didn't make the playoffs the year before, and he transformed them.
the first month and a half of the season, Judge was terrible.
Yeah.
Soto carried that team. And, if that wasn't the case, who knows where the Yankees would have been? They might have not won the division. Baltimore might have won it. Those games, and people don't care about April until it actually matters when it gets to September and October, at the end of the season. Soto carried the Yankees that first month and a half of the season in April until the middle of May before Judge figured it out. That was huge for the Yankees. They didn't have that to follow the prior year. And that's the thing. If you get just one guy, because that was the problem with the Mets in the first month and a half of the season. Nobody in that lineup, Nimmo, Alonso, Lindor, any of those guys stepped up at all. When Bader was one of your better players offensively early on in the season, you're not going to win a lot of games. We stayed afloat, but we ended up 11 games under 500, well far back of a playoff spot, and you can't have that happen. That's why you get a guy like Juan Soto.
Yeah.
That's why you get a guy like Bregman, because those guys don't let things happen like that. They take control over games. Yeah. That's a big deal.
You can't have the team fall behind and expect teams like the Diamondbacks to fall apart. Like, you can't do that every year. You have to be in control. You have to take advantage, whether that is to win the division or not. I mean, you could still win the wild card, but the Mets, they backed into the wild card last second thanks to Francisco Lindor's MVP performance.
Yeah, and it took luck, right? The Mets didn't show greatness in Milwaukee at the end of the season, right? It took a choke job by the Diamondbacks to give the Mets hope.
And they you can even go to Milwaukee. They almost blew that. The only time they were in control was against Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Where they controlled from beginning to end. Because you can even count game 2. Mark Vientos hitting the home run in the ninth in the death nail for Philly.
But, even though Philly won that game, I think we all felt like the Phillies' final nail was in the coffin. I know we were losing in game 4. I know we were before Lindor with the grand slam. But it felt like the Mets are always in control of that series. And you're 100% right about that. All right, Ant. So you came on today. It was, a few hours before the show. I was like, hey, can you hop on? So I kept you here an hour and a half because, I hate you. So, so last thing is the rapid fire question. I'm just going to throw a question out there. If you have one for me, if you don't, it's cool. But do the Mets sign Alex Bregman?
I'm gonna say no.
Oh.
I'm gonna say no. I'm trying to be fair. Like, if I say yes to every signing, I'm gonna say no, and I do think that they bring back Pete. Okay. But I don't think that they bring back both. Don't hurt me because I said that. I would love them to sign both. I just think that Pete is going to be the one that gets signed. Bregman's going to go somewhere else. I don't know where, but I would love for that to have them both. I just think it's going to be Pete, not Bregman.
All right. You got any question for me before we head out?
Sure. Now I'll flip it on you. Is Pete Alonso going to sign with the Mets?
Yeah, I think the Mets got him over a barrel. I think they're going to get him for the exact price they want. And if that 3-year 90 with opt-outs after every year are true, and I believe they are because of a source, I think it's going to be the case. I think if the Mets, I think Bregman's going to sign prior to Alonso wherever he signs. I think the Mets know that they have Alonso because Alonso's coming back with a final offer to the New York Mets. Hey, this team gave me X. He's going to come back to the Mets for their final offer. So I'm not worried about Pete Alonso going elsewhere until the Mets say no.
Yeah,
so I'm not worried about it at all.
My checklist is still intact. I said Alonso. I think Alonso, Iglesias, Winker. I think you keep Vientos at third. Let him continue to grow there. Let him continue to learn there. And then obviously you have the kids that are, Acuna and Mauricio, and they'll figure something out there. And maybe they get another starting pitcher. I wouldn't, be so sure about it, but I would like them to get a another pitcher, at least a bullpen guy. I mean, come on, come on. We got to figure this out.
Exactly. So hopefully that pitching lineup works for this rotation, because who knows? But hot take here. I think the Mets are going to sign Bregman over this next week and a half. I truly believe that. I think what this does not only makes your team better, but it puts the pressure on Alonso to lean more towards Mets, regardless of who might give him another offer, because of the fact that he sees what this team is developing into, and he wants to be a part of it. Imagine that. People want to be a part of the Mets now. Go figure, right? It's never been the case. That's a good feeling to have. And Met fans, you should be excited. Yes, it's a slow process. It sucks sometimes, right? We usually get the short end of the stick, right? We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be Bregman, Alonso. I think the Mets are going to trade for a starting pitcher. I truly believe that. If we get Sasaki, great. I mean, I'm not hoping for that. I mean, I would like that. I'm not going to, put all my chips on the table there for Sasaki. I think the Mets are going to get Bregman because it makes them better and it's going to put pressure on Alonso. They're going to sign Alonso because Alonso ain't going to have nowhere else to go. I think they're going to still trade for Luis Castillo. And I'm not going to say they're going to bring back Winker because I think he's going to find a few more $1 million and a starting job somewhere. I think Iglesias will be back. And you know what? That's a damn good offseason. I mean, that's an A offseason, in my opinion, if that happens. Yeah. We'll see. I want to thank Ant for coming on to another Hot Stove, episode 20 of the season. And I know I do have the wrong date on the bottom over there, 12/28, because I was thinking of the future. I was going to cancel the stream tonight and do it tomorrow, but I realized I'm going by family tomorrow, and I totally forgot. But that's okay.
You can watch this show tomorrow, and it'd be the same thing.
Replay. Why not? If you don't get enough of my ugly face, you can watch Ann all hour and 36 minutes of it. So, Ann, I do appreciate you last minute coming on here and talking about all the great moves the Mets are going to make. And have a good New Year if I don't speak to you. Hopefully you had a good Christmas or Hanukkah. And enjoy the rest of your week and weekend. And thanks for coming on, buddy.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. And shout out to the chat. A lot of great comments coming out from you guys today. I'll do my show Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Most likely going to do it by myself to end the year at Subway to Shea, Instagram, TikTok, X, and like and subscribe, not only to me, but you got to be liking and subscribing to what Rob's got going on right here. Make sure you subscribe to both. Enjoy your new year, my friend. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you always.
Absolutely. You're always welcome on the show and just on the channel in general. So that is Ant Rivera, Subway to Shea. Subscribe, follow him on all the social media platforms, and we'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stove, guys. As always, Met fans, let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time. Have a great night. Have a great weekend, guys. Have a good New Year. Let's go Mets.
Dead at night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, trees bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Creepers from the shadows.